I had her box in my hands when she said it. Soft, almost careless, like it didn't matter. Pick me up instead. The words froze me mid-step. The box pressed against my chest, the weight suddenly meaningless compared to the way she was looking at me. Not smiling, not teasing, just watching, like she was daring me to understand something without saying it out loud. She was standing in the middle of her living room, hair loose from where it had been pinned, a soft sweater slipping from one shoulder. There was nothing deliberate about her. No red lipstick, no carefully chosen dress. And maybe that's why I couldn't breathe. She didn't need any of that. She was 45, maybe 46, and somehow she carried herself like the world bent toward her without her ever asking it to. I set the box down slowly, careful not to make a sound. "You shouldn't carry these yourself," I murmured, because it was safer than asking why my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her lips curved. Not a smile, not exactly. "I've been carrying things by myself for a long time." That stung in a way I couldn't explain. I wanted to tell her I noticed. The way she never asked for help. The way her eyes stayed quiet even when her laugh filled a room. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, and for a moment the silence between us felt like something alive, filling every corner of the room. I bent to pick up another box, and when I stood, she was closer. Too close. Her perfume, soft, not sweet, brushed against me before her shoulder did. Her hand grazed mine as she reached for the box, and I swear, every nerve in me lit up. "You don't have to." I started, but the words got stuck. She was looking up at me now, those steady eyes holding me in place. "I know," she said simply. And for one wild second, I thought maybe she did. Know, that is. Know how my chest tightened every time her voice dipped low. Know how I caught myself memorizing the slope of her neck when she wasn't looking. The clock ticked somewhere in the kitchen. Outside, a car door slammed. Ordinary sounds. But in that room, everything felt sharp, too focused. The scrape of my shoes against her floor, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the way she tilted her head just slightly when she asked, "You okay?" I should have said yes. Should have laughed, brushed it off. Instead, I found myself staring at her, caught between wanting to step closer and wanting to run. Her sweater slipped a little further, exposing the edge of her collarbone, and she didn't fix it. Maybe she didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and this was her way of saying something neither of us was ready to name. "Pick me up instead," she repeated, but quieter this time, like it wasn't meant for the air, just for me. My breath caught. My hand twitched at my side. Every inch of space between us felt like a decision waiting to be made. And then, the front door opened. A gust of cold air swept in, followed by the heavy sound of boots on hardwood. Her eyes snapped away from mine, and just like that, the moment shattered, sharp and invisible. I turned toward the doorway, pulse hammering, trying to steady my voice, trying to remember how to breathe, and wondering, as I heard footsteps approaching, if I'd imagined the whole thing. The boots stopped in the doorway. "Didn't know you had company," a man's voice said. Older, casual, but not unfriendly. Her brother. I'd met him once at the hardware store when she'd sent me for packing tape. He glanced between us, muttered something about grabbing the last box from the car, and disappeared again, the door slamming behind him. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she smoothed her sweater back over her shoulder, fussed with the stack of boxes by the wall. Little movements that told me more than anything she could have said. By the time she finally met my eyes, whatever had been between us seconds before was locked tight behind that calm, careful smile she always wore. "Thank you," she said, softer now, like we were conspiring. "For helping." I nodded, but my throat was too tight for words. Later, after her brother left and the house went quiet again, I stayed to help break down the empty boxes. She tried to shoo me off. "You've done enough." But she didn't sound convinced, and I wasn't ready to leave. We ended up on the floor of her living room, cardboard flattened in a neat stack, coffee mugs cooling on the table between us. The house smelled like her, something floral and clean, the faint trace of vanilla from the candle she'd lit earlier. She was telling me about the house, about the years she'd spent here alone after her divorce, when her voice faltered. It was subtle, almost nothing, but I caught it. "I thought I'd sell it a dozen times," she admitted. "But it's hard to let go of something that feels like the last piece of a life you thought you'd have." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just listened, watching her trace the rim of her coffee mug with one finger. There was a quiet weight in the room, Not sad exactly, just honest. I didn't think anyone would. She stopped herself there, lips pressing together. Then, with a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes, never mind. But I understood. She didn't think anyone would notice her anymore. Not like that. I tried to keep my eyes on the boxes, but it was impossible. Every movement she made seemed louder now. The way her sweater slipped again when she leaned forward, the soft brush of her knee against mine when she shifted on the floor, the warmth of her hand when she passed me the tape without looking. It wasn't just attraction, not exactly. It was the way she carried herself, like she'd been through enough to know what mattered and what didn't. It made everything about her feel dangerous in the best kind of way. And maybe that's why I didn't pull back when her fingers brushed mine again. Longer this time, deliberate. "You're quiet tonight," she said, tilting her head, studying me like she could read the thoughts I was trying to bury. "I'm just tired," I lied. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes that told me she didn't believe me. The clock ticked in the corner. Outside, the rain that had been threatening all day finally started, soft at first, then steady. She stood to close the window, and for a moment her silhouette was framed against the glass, streetlights spilling across her skin. I don't know why I moved closer. Maybe because the silence was too much, or because I wanted to memorize the way she looked in that moment. Whatever the reason, I was standing beside her when she turned, close enough to feel the brush of her sleeve against my arm. She didn't step away. Instead, she let her hand rest lightly on my shoulder, just for a second, barely a touch, but enough to make my chest tighten. "You've been a good friend," she said, but her voice dipped at the word friend, like she didn't believe it. I looked down at her hand, at the way her fingers curled slightly, like they didn't want to let go. And then she did pull away, stepping back, clearing her throat as if nothing had happened. But the air between us had changed, charged and sharp, and when she met my eyes again, we both knew IT started with her phone buzzing. A sharp vibration against the countertop, slicing through the quiet hum of the house. She froze mid-step, coffee mug in hand, her eyes darting to where it lay face down by the sink. Neither of us moved. The rain outside was louder now, tapping steadily against the window pane, filling the silence her phone had left behind. Then it buzzed again, and this time, she set her mug down and picked it up, her thumb brushing across the screen. I didn't mean to look, but I caught the name anyway. Mark. Her ex. Her shoulders tightened, barely, but I saw it. She typed something quickly, her jaw set, then turned the phone face down again and let out a quiet breath. "Everything okay?" I asked, careful, my voice softer than I intended. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just complicated." I wanted to ask what complicated meant, but the look she gave me, guarded, polite, told me to let it go. So I did. But the air between us had shifted, heavy with something I couldn't name. She was standing by the boxes again when I crossed the room, my steps too loud against her hardwood floor. I meant to help, to give my hands something to do so I wouldn't keep staring at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. But when she turned to face me, I stopped short. Close. Too close. Neither of us said anything. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, just for a fraction of a second, but enough to make my chest tighten. "Thanks for staying late," she said, and it sounded too formal, too measured, like she was trying to put distance between us with her voice while every other part of her betrayed her. "I don't mind," I said, and I meant it. Her hand brushed my arm as she reached for the tape, fingers grazing the inside of my wrist. My pulse jumped. I wondered if she could feel it, if she noticed the way my breath stuttered. The room felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in, like the quiet was daring one of us to break it. Then, footsteps. Her brother's voice in the hallway, closer now. "You still in here?" She stepped back so fast, she almost tripped over the box behind her, and I caught her by the elbow without thinking, steadying her. The warmth of her skin burned into my hand, and I didn't let go right away, couldn't. "Yeah," she called out, her voice steady but thinner than usual. "Almost done." The footsteps retreated, the door closing again, and the silence that followed felt louder than the interruption itself. She looked down at where my hand still rested on her arm, then back up at me. Slowly, deliberately, I let go. "I should," she started, then stopped, her lips pressing together like she couldn't quite finish the thought. "Yeah," I said, though I had no idea what I was agreeing to. We stood there for what felt like a long time, neither of us moving, the space between us charged and fragile. I could feel the thrum of my own heartbeat in my throat, in my fingertips, in the quiet stretch of air that connected us. And then, softer than the rain outside, she whispered, "This is dangerous." I almost told her she was right. I almost told her I didn't care. But before I could find the words, her phone buzzed again, sharp, insistent, and whatever moment we'd been building crumbled, leaving us standing there, breathless, wanting, and still unable to step away. That I don't remember crossing the room. One moment, I was standing by the window, pretending to check my phone, and the next, I was inches from her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her skin. She didn't step back this time. The rain had stopped, leaving the night heavy and quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound sharp. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of her breath as she exhaled, the faint clink of the mug she set down on the counter without looking away from me. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "Doing what?" My voice was rougher than I wanted it to be, almost unrecognizable. Her eyes narrowed, like she didn't believe me, like she'd been holding back longer than I realized. Looking at me like that. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Maybe I don't know how else to look at you." The words hung there between us, too heavy to take back. Her breath caught, almost imperceptibly, and then she laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing she could do. "You don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. It's not supposed to happen. Not like this." "Why not?" I stepped closer, slow enough to give her space to pull away, but she didn't. "Because you're older? Because people would talk? Because I don't trust myself," she said, and the crack in her voice felt like a hand tightening around my chest. I reached up before I could stop myself, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. My knuckles grazed her cheek, and she leaned into it, just slightly, just enough to make my pulse trip over itself. "You don't have to," I said quietly, my thumb catching on the edge of her jaw. "Trust me instead." For a second, I thought she would. Her eyes softened, her lips parted, and the space between us shrank until I could feel the faintest brush of her sweater against my shirt. I don't know who moved first, maybe neither of us, but suddenly her hand was on my chest, fingers curling into the fabric like she needed something to hold on to. "This is wrong," she whispered, but there was no conviction in it, only a tremor that betrayed her. "Then stop me," I breathed, though every part of me prayed she wouldn't. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, and the world tilted. The room, the house, the rain-soaked night outside, all of it faded until there was only her, close enough that her perfume wrapped around me like heat. I tilted my head, slow, waiting for her to tell me no, waiting for the inevitable moment where reality would pull us apart again. But she didn't move. She didn't say a word. Her hand slid higher, from my chest to the side of my neck, her thumb brushing my jaw, tentative and careful, like she was testing whether I was real. I leaned in, just enough to feel her breath against my lips, just enough for the tension to coil so tight it almost hurt. And then, a sharp knock at the door. She flinched, pulling back like she'd been burned, her hand falling away, her eyes wide and panicked. I froze, every muscle in my body locked, my heart hammering in my ears. Another knock, louder this time, followed by a voice calling her name. The moment shattered, but the electricity between us didn't fade. If anything, it burned hotter, a live wire we both knew we'd touch again, no matter how much it cost. The knock didn't stop. 3 sharp raps, followed by her name again, sharper this time, urgent. She didn't look at me as she crossed the room, smoothing her hair, tugging her sweater higher on her shoulder like she could erase what had almost happened. I stayed frozen, my chest tight, every nerve in me screaming to do something. Anything, but all I could do was watch. When she opened the door, the night air spilled in, damp and cool, carrying the smell of rain. Her brother stood there, jaw tight, eyes flicking past her and landing on me. "You left your phone on the porch," he said flatly, holding it out. She hesitated before taking it. "Thanks," she murmured, her voice steady but a little too careful. His gaze lingered, sharp and knowing, before he muttered something about needing to get going and disappeared back into the night. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. She turned slowly, phone clutched in her hand, her eyes unreadable. "How much longer do you think we can keep pretending?" The question hit harder than I expected. "Pretending what?" I asked, though we both knew what she meant. She gestured between us, her hand trembling just enough that I noticed that this isn't happening, that nobody sees it. I wanted to tell her that nobody had to know, that we could figure it out, that what I felt for her wasn't something I could turn off even if I tried. But the words tangled in my throat. She stepped closer, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine as she passed to set her phone on the counter. The lightest touch, accidental maybe, but my breath caught anyway. "You don't get it," she said, quieter now, her back to me. "If anyone finds out," she didn't finish, but she didn't have to. The risk was everywhere, in the way her brother had looked at me, in the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes now. I moved before I could stop myself, crossing the space between us until I was standing right behind her, close enough to smell the faint trace of her shampoo, to see the tremor in her hands where they rested on the counter. "Then tell me to leave," I said softly. Her shoulders tensed. She didn't turn around. "Tell me to walk out that door, and I will." "But if you don't," she exhaled sharply, like the sound of my voice had cracked something open in her. When she finally turned to face me, her eyes were shining, her breath uneven. "I don't want you to leave," she whispered. The confession hung between us, fragile and dangerous, and in that moment, the line we'd been dancing around for weeks didn't just blur, it disappeared entirely. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, like even the walls were holding their breath. She was still in front of me, her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, she wasn't hiding. No polite distance, no careful smiles, just her, raw, unguarded, trembling in a way that made something inside me ache. I took a step closer. She didn't move. Another step, and the space between us vanished until the edge of her sweater brushed my shirt, until I could feel the faint heat of her breath against my neck. "This doesn't have to happen," she whispered, though the words sounded hollow, almost like she wanted me to ignore them. "Yeah," I said quietly, my voice rough. "But it already is." Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, and when they opened again, there was no hesitation left. She reached up, her fingers trembling slightly as they curled into the fabric at my chest. I leaned down, slow, giving her every chance to stop me, to pull away. But she didn't. She stayed right there, close enough that I could feel the hitch of her breath, close enough that every thought in my head went quiet except for one. Don't let her go. Her hand slid higher, over my collarbone, her fingertips grazing the side of my neck, and I swear my pulse jumped beneath her touch. "This is crazy," she murmured, but it wasn't a protest. It was a surrender. "Maybe," I breathed, "but I'm not walking away." And then, finally, the distance between us broke. Not a perfect, cinematic moment. Not clean or careful. Just two people colliding because neither of us could hold it in anymore. Her forehead pressed against mine first, the softest touch, and then she tilted her chin, her breath catching as my hand cupped her jaw. Her lips hovered there, barely brushing, not quite a kiss, but enough to make my chest tighten like it might break. We stayed like that for a beat, suspended in something sharp and inevitable, both of us knowing there was no going back. When her lips finally met mine, it wasn't gentle. It was raw and aching, years of loneliness and weeks of tension spilling over in one messy, desperate moment. When we finally broke apart, she didn't step back. She stayed close, her hand still against my chest, her forehead resting against mine. "This changes everything," she whispered, and there was fear in her voice, but there was relief, too. "Yeah," I said, because there was nothing else to say. And in that quiet, breathless space, with her heart hammering against my own, we both understood the truth neither of us could ignore anymore. Whatever this was, dangerous, reckless, impossible, it was ours. The rain had started again, soft and steady, drumming gently against the windows. We were still in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like moving would break whatever fragile peace had settled over us. Her hand was in mine now, not tentative, not trembling, just there, warm and steady, like it had always belonged. For a while, neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say that the quiet between us didn't already hold. Finally, she let out a small, shaky laugh. "You know this is complicated," she said, though there wasn't much fight left in the words. "Yeah," I admitted. "But I don't care." Her eyes met mine, soft and searching, like she was trying to find a reason to tell me to leave. But whatever reason she was looking for, she didn't find it. Instead, she stepped closer, closing the last bit of space between us, until her forehead rested lightly against my chest. My arms came around her without thinking, pulling her in, holding her there like maybe I'd wake up and this would all vanish if I let go. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she murmured, the words muffled against my shirt. "Then don't," I said, my voice quiet but certain. "Not with me." We stayed like that for a long time, just breathing together, letting the world shrink to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against mine. It didn't feel rushed or dangerous anymore. It just felt right. Eventually, she tilted her head up, her eyes glinting in the dim kitchen light. "You'll probably hate me in a year," she teased softly, but there was a vulnerability under it, the kind that made me tighten my arms around her just a little more. "Not a chance," I said, and I meant it. Later, when we finally moved to the couch, we didn't talk much. We didn't need to. She curled up against me, her hand resting on my chest, her fingers tracing absent patterns against my shirt. For the first time, there was no pretending, no careful distance. Just us, sitting in the quiet, the world outside muted by rain, and the simple, undeniable truth that we'd chosen each other. Messy, complicated, and real. When she tilted her head, brushing the lightest kiss against my jaw, it wasn't desperate like before. It was softer now, certain. A promise neither of us had to say out loud. I don't know how long we sat there, but when she finally whispered, "Stay," it wasn't a question. And I didn't hesitate. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?